everyone, and welcome to a special AI edition of the Venture Variety Show, brought to you in collaboration with AInews.com. I'm your host, Alastair, and today we're on the topic of AI in the art world with Daniel Ambrosi. We're going to explore how AI is transforming his industry and what it means for the future. So let's jump in and meet Daniel.
Okay, so I'm a fine artist. I have been using AI now for almost 10 years in my work. And I suppose you could say that not only am I an accidental artist, I'm certainly an accidental AI artist. I did not set out to become either, actually. I have a real love of landscapes and special places. I'm an avid hiker and skier and have had wonderful experiences in nature, being totally in awe of what's before me, and it would inspire me to question reality and how do other people see this, and how can I share this with others. Being out in the middle of some place like Glacier National Park, how can I really get across what I'm experiencing to my friends and family? I have a long time passion and interest in photography. Since my freshman year at Cornell, when I was in architecture school, I took a summer photography course, and that really introduced me to landscape photography in particular. And over the decades, I would say that the ability to convey the fullness of the landscape experience through traditional photography left me dissatisfied. And because I have some chops with a background in design, architecture, and a master's in 3D graphics way back in the early 80s, I had some tools to kind of experiment with and try to find better ways of capturing what we experience. But it's a really tall order when you think about it. A landscape experience is at least a 5 or 6 dimensional experience. It's one that you have in space and time, and it can affect you emotionally and intellectually and philosophically and so on. And to try to capture or bottle that entire experience and convert it to a two-dimensional image is not an easy task. But over time, I experimented with a variety of computational photography tricks like high dynamic range photography, panoramic photography, and so on. And ultimately, I think to jump to the punchline is I think I've gotten to the point where, as of about 10 years ago, when I introduced AI to my process, I think I got it over the goal line and was able to create grand scale landscape experiences that affected people like the real experience was affecting me, not just visually, but also viscerally. And when I had my first of two key technological breakthroughs, the first of which happened in September of 2011 and was a computational photography breakthrough, I realized I was on a path that was worth pursuing in a more concentrated way. 4 years later, when Deep Dream came along and I saw the opportunity to superscale it and apply it to my photography to take it to the next level of introducing sort of a cognitive element, I feel like that got me over the goal line. And that's when the fine art world actually started to take notice. So I had an intention, a pure motivation that had nothing to do with these tools per se, but like MacGyver, finding a paperclip and thinking, hey, maybe I can defuse this bomb with this paperclip. That's kind of how it was for me with AI. Is my work is not AI generated art. It's AI assisted or AI
Right.
augmented.
Excellent.
It's about applying AI to images that were created in other ways. It's really AI assisted
Mhm.
computational photography is what it is. So people throw that AI generated phrase out there way too much. There are many uses of AI in less sort of primary ways, like mine, where it's really an assist or collaborator or partner, and it's operating upon, original source material that comes from a different place. So that's one distinction I think is really worth making.
No,
in
it's an
this
important one,
conversation.
and I'm glad you made it. I was gonna point that out, that people can go to your website and see some examples at danielambrosi.com. It is, you start off with photography, and as you say, you use some AI tools, some AI technology to assist you in the final creation. So it's, yeah, for the layperson, the average consumer, it's not like you went to whatever, an AI gen site, a chat GPT, and said, create for me a landscape. There's a lot more involved in your process. Is there any other medium associated with your art? Right? It's primarily photography, and then
It's actually a combination of I'd like to say that one thing I came up with recently is kind of like a 18th century landscape painter using 21st century tools. My paints and brushes are cameras, computers, and AI.
excellent.
The tools specifically are photography, computer graphics, and artificial intelligence. Those are the three tools that together, in pretty much equal parts, are employed to create my artwork.
So Daniel, can you tell us, for take a moment and tell us kind of what are some of the challenges you've encountered having implemented, having used AI assisted technology to create artwork?
So, in my case, the very first challenge, once seeing what the tool could do, at least at low resolution as a test, was superscaling the AI for my 500 megapixel images. Deep Dream, uh, as it was released, was just a diagnostic hack that Alex Mordvinsov made to help them understand their own image recognition AI. It was not designed for production use. So I was lucky enough to recruit two brilliant engineers, Joseph Smar from Google and Chris Lamb from NVIDIA, to spend 4 months of their spare time hacking on this code to superscale it for my purposes. It took them about that long to achieve liftoff, and another 2 months to give me a UI that I could use on my own without bothering them. But it worked, and I'm the only one with that superscaled version. It's on a virtual server on the Amazon cloud, and I've been using it to this day.
How many other artists are out there using similar techniques, using their own proprietary computer technology to do this? I mean, is it a small group or?
Yeah, so I would give two answers to that question. One is, as far as I can tell, there is nobody else doing what I'm doing, at least at
Mhm.
grand scale. It's a weird, idiosyncratic solution to a problem that I personally had, and I'm not surprised no one else is doing it because it's just so personal and kind of unique to my own journey. But the there are plenty of folks in the AI art space that are far more adept than I am at coding and the use
Mm.
of computing and AI tools that, there's such a variety of applications and a range in which people are exploring this. For me, like I said, it was pure opportunism for AI to, you know, for me to use AI in what I'm doing. It just, I saw the tool, it fit, and it worked. For others, they're actively exploring and investigating AI itself as a medium and as an artistic, impetus. And in some cases, they're training, they're using their own data sets for training. They're doing, there's just such a wide variety of what people are doing. And that's one of the great things I think about the Christie's auction. We had 34 artists, and there was not a lot of overlap in terms of what people were doing. If you go through that collection, it's a very eclectic mix of approaches and tools and technologies. And I think that's a credit, a testament to Nicole and her team for curating such an interesting mix of high human agency. That's the key thing. The open letter calling for Christie's to cancel it, characterizing much of the art or most of the art as low effort AI generated slop, was exceedingly unfair. I even at one point posted on Twitter to one of the antagonists. Now that the auction pages have gone online and you can read what's behind these artworks, are you feeling foolish at all for sending this letter? But I didn't get a
Yeah,
response.
let's address that. You referenced Christie's, the famous auction house. They held an auction called augmented. I should double check that.
Intelligence,
Thank you.
augmented intelligence.
Augmented intelligence. They had, you referenced it. You said 34 different artists. They sold their work similar to you. I assume that the work was AI assisted, and
Well, some was AI generated. Yeah, yeah. And mine, I call AI augmented. I think they called the show Augmented Intelligence to sort of, make a point of expressing the high degree of human agency involved with all these
Mhm.
artists, even the ones using the more modern or controversial AI image generators,
Yeah.
using those in a critically informed way and doing interesting things with it.
What you sold a piece there? I think collectively the 34 artists sold 730, close to $730,000 worth of uh, the
Yeah.
auction sold
They
price.
exceeded what they
Nice. Yeah.
estimated it would be. I think they thought it would sell maybe around 600,000. It sold about 730.
Incredible.
There were some surprises, some people that were highlighted that had wonderful works. Pindar Van Arman is a friend of mine, and I loved the piece that he had. It was really interesting and beautiful. I can't believe he didn't get a bid,
Hmm.
but it's crazy how the market works. There's no telling what's going on. I was it didn't matter to me whether or not I got a bid. I was just so excited to be part of this historic auction, of the first of its kind ever. I had already kind of figured out with my gallery's New York branch that if it didn't sell, I'd have a place to put the
Mhm.
crate. So I had that all worked out. But then within the second day, I was one of the first to have a bid hit the low end of the estimate, and then which was really, I was surprised and delighted. It was like at that point I realized what's so great about that is the art is going home with someone. That's more important to me than the money. It's like I want this thing out and being seen and on someone's
Mhm.
wall.
You think we're going to see more of this, or just it'll just be included in regular art auctions, perhaps?
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to say. I mean, it definitely is
Yeah.
developing slowly but surely. And it's been going on for quite some time. People don't realize it. Some of the early works are from the '60s. Harold Cohen and Chuck Zuri. It's been a long time coming.
Yeah. Any final thoughts then on the Christie's auction?
Again, some of these distinctions that I think need to be made.
Yes.
And when that letter came out, I was actually quite delighted for a couple reasons. One is the PR value. You're on the right track with a first of its kind auction or exhibition when there's criticism like with the first Impressionism show, which remember that critic that called the work impressionist was insulting them, and now that insult is the term used for one of the most popular art movements of all time. So and the other reason I was happy was because I knew that it would open up conversations like this and an opportunity to add some nuance to the conversation and move that conversation forward and resolve some of these issues. I don't think the concerns of these artists is invalid. They have some genuine concerns there, but we need to kind of distinguish a few things. So we talked about distinctions. We need to distinguish AI generated art from AI augmented art. We also need to distinguish fine artists from artists for
Yeah.
hire or
Uh-huh.
commercial artists, as they're often called. In my definition, fine artists are those who make the art they want to make, and if they're lucky, someone buys it. Okay? Artists for hire are those who make art at the request of and or under client direction, also known as commercial artists. Some people do both. I'm strictly a fine artist. When it comes to AI impacting the livelihoods of either of those two camps, I have been known to say that you don't have to worry one iota about AI affecting the livelihood of
Hmm.
fine artists because things can't possibly get any worse for fine artists. There is nowhere to go but up. It's got to be one of the hardest ways you can try to make a living.
Mhm.
It's my fourth and by far hardest career, also the most rewarding, and I love what I'm doing. But it's there's nowhere to go but up. Don't worry about AI taking away anything from fine artists. Artists for hire, yes, that is being impacted already in many ways, and the reason for that is completely unavoidable. It's just the march of progress and technology. I've seen it. I have personally participated in at least a half dozen paradigm shifts in technology, and I have seen the same pattern over and over again. If a new technology can produce something at 80% of the quality of the incumbent technology at 20% of the cost, it's going to win out every time. And that's what's happening now. And the problem is that a lot of people don't care about that last 20% of quality. Some do. And I feel it behooves the commercial artists to embrace this technology because it's going that way. They're going to have to compete against people using that stuff. And with the skills and talents and experience that they have, they're going to become best in class quicker than anyone. So, you may as well wrap your arms around these tools and use them and show what can really be done. That said, there are still going to be those cheapskates, the copywriting supervisor at some ad agency who, why do I need to hire an artist to do a storyboard? I can do it with ChatGPT. That's a reality of the march of technology. I don't think hand-drawn art or illustration is ever going to completely go away. Photography did not put an end to landscape painting in any way, shape, or form, but they are valid concerns that they have, which brings us to our next set of distinctions in terms of copyright and fair use. We need to distinguish between these AI generating tools, these image generators. We need to distinguish between training and output. I think it's absolutely fair use. This is my opinion. It'll be adjudicated, I'm sure, over time. And in some ways it has already with the Google Books project. Training on copyrighted content is fair use. Outputting copies of that copyrighted content is not fair use. And then there are the gray areas in between. For example, when you use an image generator, you can just use some prompts that define a look and create an image without referencing any specific artists that may have been in the training data set. And you can create an image, fairly quickly of decent quality. The Copyright Office recently said, with that light weight of human agency, that's not a copyrightable image. But there are plenty of examples that they gave of applying more human agency to actually use these tools to create something on a case-by-case basis that could be argued as copyrightable. Where it gets sticky is when people use the in the style of prompt and say, give me an image of this, that, and the other thing in the style of this artist. It's unfortunate that these AI companies did not ask these artists to opt in. They should have been asked to opt in, not to opt out after the fact. Okay. Unfortunately, that's water under the bridge right now. But if someone explicitly calls out an artist or artists in their prompts, one thing that the AI companies can do is fix the metadata for these image files to expose those specific callouts and to make it very easy to always find out, was this, based on in the style of a particular artist? And that would generate a lot of exposure. I don't think those artists need to be compensated. The value of exposure is huge. I think that would be an easy fix to make. I'd like to see that made. But, there are all these gray areas in terms of how much is it relying on a specific artist's style or work versus is it a remix under a fair use, scraping of data, of which there's plenty of precedent for that being acceptable.
Do you get approached by artists asking you questions about this, about your work, about the implications of AI assisted creation in your industry?
Yeah, I get asked, and typically people are coming from a very shallow level of understanding of these tools that only go back a couple of years. So they'll ask me questions like, so what kind of prompts are you using? When it's like, no, there are no prompts. This is way before prompts. 10 years ago, that wasn't the way this worked. I have access to 84 layers in a neural network, each one of which creates a different motif. I can set that direction. I can't control the details, blah, blah, blah. So, so their questions typically are ill-formed because they don't realize that it's not just about Dali or Mid Journey. That there was this whole history and legacy before that. Um,
So where are we going? What if you had to look into your crystal ball? Where how are things going to look in the future with AI's role? In a couple years or a decade?
I think what separates fine art
Yeah.
from illustration or image making is the idea, the artist's intention, the motivation. I'm really agnostic about the tools artists use. What matters to me most is what are they trying to
Hmm.
express, and if the ideas behind the art are deep enough and coming from a place of deep exploration and investigation and so on, it doesn't matter to me what the tools are. A lot of typical questions that artists get from people is, how long did it take you to make that?
Oh,
What tools did
right.
you use? How is that, how is that created? It's like, what difference does it make? What are you getting out of this artwork when you look at it? What is it communicating to you? Does it move you? So I think, the possibilities from here to use these tools for expression and exploration and creative inquiry. I think about the one piece in the Christie show that was by that artist Human, where did you see that one where you basically speak into a microphone any random craziness you want to say, and the AI starts to generate things like you can say like pink elephants riding bicycles on the beach, and within a few seconds you've got images of that, right?
Hmm.
So one idea that I love, I'm a big fan of VR. I like spending time in VR, especially in 6 degree of freedom virtual environments that are nature based. I'll meditate in VR and so on. I love the idea of a social VR application driven by the tool that this artist is using at Christie's, where it just very in a lightweight manner, as you're sitting around the virtual campfire with your fellow, with your friends and fellow artists or whoever, slowly over time, the environment is changing based upon what is being said. I think that would be an amazing experience that could induce a feedback loop of conversation and perception and take things to really crazy places. That would be a fun time on a Friday night to spend sitting around with friends from all over the world talking about stuff and seeing your environment change to match
Yeah.
that. Is that art? Is that fine art? No, not necessarily. It's art
Uh-huh.
related, but I think where this technology can go and the applications and the possibilities are really open ended. I'm very excited about it.
Yeah. I'm excited too. This has been a fascinating conversation. As we wind down here, any other final thoughts?
Yeah. Well, I wish. Yeah. In terms of the controversy, that is hot right now. Obviously, to get 6,300 artists sign an open letter asking Christie's to cancel it, I would really ask for these folks to dig a little deeper and try to understand a little bit more about how these tools are being used. I'm empathetic of their plight. It is real. There will have to be some adaptation, and it's inevitable. And it's not like we can put the genie back in the bottle. So I would just say, roll up your sleeves, get involved yourself, take a look at these tools, despite what distaste they might leave in your mouth right now. See what the possibilities are. If even just for ideation and not execution, you use these tools, the ability for AI to allow you to explore way many more options than you could on your own. That's certainly how I use it. And then it's not just the power that you can leverage. For me, it's not just about ideation, but in terms of execution, the intensity, the intricacy of my grand scale artworks that, might be 8 feet tall by 16 feet wide. And, you can go right up to it. And it's just incredibly intense with all these crazy hallucinations and motifs and hidden figures and so on. I could never paint that in a million years. I mean, it's just the leverage that a human AI hybrid, you know, partnership can lend opens up, new possibilities for new creations, things that have never been seen before. In fact, that's probably the most common response that I get from people. It's funny. I had a solo show in Half Moon Bay for 7 months a few years ago. I got to see a lot of people respond to these works, and the reaction was incredibly consistent. It was always the same four things that would happen when people would see my big dreamscape that, by the way, is now in the Computer History Museum in Mountain View if you ever want to go see it. Yeah, yeah, that one, and that's a good one. It's of Filoli Gardens,
Okay.
and it's part of their AI chatbots exhibition. It'll be up there for quite a while. So that museum, just so you know, the Computer History Museum is the most amazing museum for all things
Mhm.
computing. It's right near the Google
Yeah.
campus. It's an incredible museum. I'd recommend it to anyone. But in any case, I told you there are four things that happen every time. I don't need to bore you with all four things, but the last thing, which is my favorite thing to hear, is people would very consistently say, I've never seen anything like this before.
Yeah.
That's what AI can do for us. It can allow us to create things that have never been seen before. And that's moving art forward in my book.
All right, everyone. That wraps up this special AI episode of the Venture Variety Show, which was created in collaboration with AInews.com. A big thank you to Daniel for joining us and sharing his thoughts and expertise. If you found this helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe to AInews.com, as well as my own, The Venture Variety Show, which you can find on Substack and all the other platforms. Please also visit AInews.com and subscribe to the newsletter, where you can find more AI driven stories. That's it for now. See you next time.